I'm going to get a drink of water and we'll get started here. All right, this morning we're going to go on a bit of a journey of discovery. I'll give you an insight into how things unfolded in my consciousness this week, how things kind of developed. So I don't know if you're if you ever listen to any of the true crime podcasts that they have, but it's sort of a journey of discovery. The journalist starts out and they say, well, there's this person who's been convicted and they're in prison, but there's these other people who say that they're innocent. And then the journalist goes around and starts interviewing people. And they say, well, this is what I found this week. And then next week they pick up, and the week after they pick up. And sometimes they find out that what they discovered the first week wasn't entirely true, or they pick up another piece of information. But basically the audience is on this journey with this journalist. They're following this journalist as they kind of uncover the story, and they take you all the way through. And it's a very popular genre of podcasting now. Some of the most popular podcasts in the country are in this true crime journey of discovery format. But that's sort of how life works, right? We can sit down and we can take a class, and we can read lots of things, and we can be told lots of things. And somebody has gone before us, and they have distilled it, and they have taken their point of view, and they have put it down for us in a way that we can kind of read and study and perhaps benefit from what they've done. But a great deal of life unfolds in our own personalized journey of discovery, you know. And I just love that idea that every day we get up, each and every day, no matter how young or how old we are, no matter what our level of education might be, each day we get up and we have an opportunity to discover just a little bit more how magnificent life is this day, just a little bit more how magnificent God's love is this day. Sort of an unfoldment, like one thing leads to another. I've mentioned this before. There's a movie, and it's an old movie with George C. Scott and Joanne Woodward, and the title is They Might Be Giants. And the plot of the movie is kind of very simple and very cute. But George C. Scott is a retired judge I think it's in New York State. Most of the scenes are shot in New York City. He's a retired judge, and his family is trying to have him committed so that they can get their hands on his fortune. And his name is Holmes. And Joanne Woodward is a psychiatrist the state sends out to evaluate him, to find out if he is indeed insane. And her name is Dr. Watson. And he dresses the part. He has the deer slayer cap, and he has the raincoat and the magnifying glass and the bent stem pipe. And he takes her around New York, and he's showing her everything, how everything is a clue. Everything is a clue. And he's seeming random things. There's a newspaper laying in a waste bin on the corner of the street, and he looks at it, and the headline says something. He says, "That's a clue. That's a clue." And he takes her with him on this journey of discovery, following these seemingly unrelated clues. So I'm not going to ruin the end of the movie for you. But I got a kick out of it because sometimes life is like that. Sometimes we find one thing, and that thing leads us to another thing, and then it leads us to another thing, and then it leads us to another thing. And by the time we get done, we found something magnificent that has, you know, maybe very little to do with where we started. So that's sort of the setup. So for today, what I would like to say to please keep in mind, because I'm going to wander a little bit here today. Not that I don't wander every Sunday, but I'm going to wander a little bit more perhaps today. But what we want to keep in mind today is deja vu, right? And I use the Yogi Berra quote. It's that deja vu stuff all over again. Deja vu. There's nothing new under the sun is a French saying. And what I mean by that is, if we look at the truly important things in life, what are the truly important things in this life? Other people have dealt with those issues. Other people have written about those issues. Other people have given us guidance of those issues. And we don't need to waste time reinventing the wheel. Okay? It's already there. But our journey of discovery is just that. The presence is already here. The love is already here. The divine is already here. We don't have to go outside and seek anything. We don't have to know magical formulas or secret incantations or certain rituals or things like that. Those things may help us along the way, but they don't make anything that wasn't already here appear. All we have to do is listen, be still, to learn to avoid the distractions of mind, the diversions of mind, and to discover that which is already there. So in the East, they give us a teaching parable that it's very, very, very good to remember. So we are like someone who was standing on the edge of a pond and we dropped a valuable jewel and it fell into the water. Now we want to recover that jewel. So we stick our hand down in the water and we start splashing all around, kind of feeling around, trying to find this gemstone. You know, we're frantic. We've lost it. It's worth a fortune. It's very valuable. It's an heirloom. It's been in the family forever. And we splash and we splash and we splash. And the harder we make it, the harder we work at it, the more difficult it becomes. The surface of the water is all broken in ripples and it's reflecting light, and we can no longer see down through the surface of the water to what's below. Our activity has stirred up mud, and now the mud has clouded the water. And we can't see. And what we are told is what we must do is stop the activity. We must relax. We must let everything settle. The mud will settle down to the bottom. The ripples on the surface will even out. And when we become calm, the water becomes calm, and we can see that which is there, the precious gemstone. See? And of course, this is symbolic. We are trying to find that precious gemstone, which is the very core of what we are, the very presence of the divine, the very love of the divine. It's already here. But in order to find that which is already here, we must be still. We must calm down. Ancient wisdom. People have gone before us. There's another tale that comes to us, I believe it's from Buddhism, and it's about this group that was traveling through the forest, through the jungles, and they came to a gorge, and they had to get across it. And they figured out a way to get across this gorge. They got over it. And as soon as they did, two of the men started chopping down trees and gathering vines and things like that. And they started building a bridge back across the gorge. And there was another man with them who says, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? We are already across the gorge. We don't need a bridge. And the answer was, we are building the bridge for those who come after us. Okay? They were doing something to leave a path to help those who came after them. There are those who have gone before us on the spiritual path, who have built bridges, who have laid roads, who have pointed the way. And there's no need for us to create everything anew. We just need to pay attention. We just need to go back. So that's kind of the theme of today. So here's the unfoldment. Here's a journey of discovery, how my week started and where we went through Wednesday night and how we got to today. So on Monday, I attended a presentation by the Native American Studies Center at the University of South Carolina in Lancaster. And it was on Native American mythology, and it was specifically to be about the role of the trickster in Native American mythology, the raven, the coyote, things like this. There's a prominent character that appears not only in Native American mythology, but in mythologies around the world, of this character who's kind of a trickster. In medieval times became the Court Jester. So I attended this. It was a video meet on the computer, and I attended it. And there was a lady there who's from the local nation, the Catawba Nation, which is a local American Indian tribe here in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And she started us off with a few stories that came from her people, came from her culture. And one of them was the story of the first man and the first woman. This is a creation myth, and every culture has a creation myth. Where did we come from? One of the primary questions of human beings. And she went through and she related the story. I can't do it justice. I can't remember the whole thing. But she went through and she related this story of the first man and the first woman. And I was just blown away by how similar the story is to Adam and Eve, to the Garden of Eden. And I said, wow. And I'm thinking to myself, well, the Europeans came over and the missionaries came over and they tried to convert people and taught them the stories and things like that. So I asked the question, you could type a question in the chat room, and I asked the question, and I said, does this story predate European contact? Which is kind of how things were measured in these sessions, before and after European contact. And she said, yes. She says, this story has been around for thousands of years, and my people have been telling the story this way long before the Europeans got here. So I thought, gee, that's interesting, because I remember reading in Joseph Campbell, he kind of showed how similar mythologies appeared in different cultures. And the difference is that the characters and the costumes and the setting, the context, was dependent upon the culture. But the general idea was very much the same. So he gave the example of, I believe it was the Algonquian Indians, and the story is that there was a young Indian man, and one day a stranger appears. And the stranger challenges this young brave to wrestle. And they wrestle, and they become good friends, and they compete and they wrestle. And one day the stranger says, today when we wrestle, you're going to kill me and cut off my head and plant it in the ground. And the boy says, I don't want to kill you, you're my friend. He says, trust me, I'm not an ordinary man, you're going to have to trust me, you're going to have to do this. So the brave follows the instructions, he wrestles the man, he kills him, cuts off his head, plants it in the ground. And this is where the first stalk of corn came from. Right? So you can see that the mythology there is that the food that was very important to this people is a gift from the gods. And then Campbell takes us down to the South Sea Islands, and there's a very similar tale of a young princess who's swimming in the lagoon, and this eel comes up and brushes against her leg, and it's a giant eel, and the eel crawls out of the water onto the beach and becomes a handsome young man. And they fall in love. And one night he says to her, tonight you're going to have to kill me, you're going to have to cut my head off, you're going to have to plant it in the sand. And she says, I don't want to do that. Anyway, she does. And this is where the first coconut tree came from. The coconut being a very, very important source of food for these people. And the idea is the same, that the food that they eat is a gift from the gods. Now, and each culture has mythologies around creation, around where did fire come from, around flood, and around food. So what Campbell was telling us is, from his view, that there's certain primordial ideas, or certain essential ideas, I think he called them, that are trying to bubble up through human consciousness. And they do that in the costumes, in the culture, in the character of the society in which they arise. Now, other people will say, well, it's just, our brains kind of work the same no matter where we are, and where food comes from is an important question, and it's no wonder that we develop similar ideas. You're going to have to decide for yourself what you believe, right? To me, cutting off somebody's head and sticking it in the sand is a little far-fetched to say, well, just because the way the brain is wired, people would naturally think of that. But it gets down to the essential question that I keep saying we need to ask and answer. Does matter create consciousness, or did consciousness create matter? That's really the difference in the point of view between materialism and spiritualism. Did matter create consciousness, or did consciousness create matter? So at any rate, I listened to this lady tell the story, and it got me thinking a little bit about Campbell. It got me thinking about how these fundamental ideas seem to emerge in human consciousness, And other people have gone before us. Other people have gone before us. We have significant issues that we are dealing with in our culture, but other people have gone before us and faced similar issues in the past. What can we learn from that? So then our Wednesday night group met, and in our Wednesday night group, we had watched a video about a Buddhist monk, Matthew Ricard, and many of you might have seen him. He's frequently seen with the Dalai Lama. He's a Frenchman, was a physician, became a Buddhist monk, is a very experienced meditator, and he participates in the mind science experiments where the Tibetan Buddhists and scientists are working together to try to determine what happens inside the brain when one meditates. You'll see him on TV shows wearing a shower cap with electrodes all over it so they can kind of look into his brain while he's meditating. Anyway, a fascinating man. So the topic of his discussion was loving kindness. Loving kindness is an attitude, is a spiritual practice, and the Buddhists teach this. Remember I was talking about compassion last week, and how that opens our heart, and how that helps us to feel at one with others. This is loving kindness. And it was very timely because it was recorded within the last few months. It was recorded during the pandemic. And he was talking about loving kindness in this situation that we're in, and how it opens us up. And something that he said really struck me. He said, over and over in different times during the interview, he talked about becoming better human beings. And the Dalai Lama, I've heard him say this as well. The purpose of religion should be to make better human beings. Now, and he kept talking about that, how loving kindness opens up our heart, how loving kindness helps us to become better human beings. And I had to ask myself, well, that's a very, very vague term, you see, a very generic term. What do we mean by better human beings? Because we can take people and ask them what that means, and we'll get different answers, And some people will say, well, charity, to be charitable, to give a helping hand to those in need, that's being kind, and it's helping us to become better. And other people will say, well, no, it's not, because you're enabling people and they become dependent upon charity, and they never start to discover their own potential. And it kind of reminded me of, I worked in Seattle a lot many years ago. And the city of Seattle at that time had signs everywhere, and it said, "Don't give money to the street people. Don't give money to the beggars. You're only enabling their addictions." And what they did was they had tokens. You could go somewhere, and you could buy these tokens. So you give them $10, they give you a certain number of tokens. And the idea was, if you felt compelled, if you felt like you had to do something to help the homeless, give them a token, because this token could then be redeemed for food or shelter or essential things, but not drugs and alcohol. But the idea was, sometimes in our desire to help, we may actually be hurting. So some people will take that position. Let's not help anybody. Let's not help anybody, because we could be hurting them. And then other people will take the position and say, well, wait a second, these are human beings and they're suffering, and we need to find a way to be helpful. And that seems to be, to me, if I look at our society today, we seem to be kind of divided equally on those two sides. Look at the results in the last election, 49.8 to 49.6 or something like that. We're equally divided, and the two sides of the two camps seem to be divided along those lines. And I wasn't quite sure what those lines might be. But having started the week with some exposure to mythology, thinking back against mythology, I picked up Bullfinch's Mythology, which has been on my bookshelf for many years, and I take it out from time to time and I read it. But I woke up Saturday morning, and it was just the cover of that book just kept flashing in front of my face, in front of my consciousness. I said, I have to pick that up. I have to read that. So I did. And the opening paragraph of the author's preface, it starts off this way, and I'm paraphrasing it, but you can go look it up. But he said, if your idea of success is having more stuff and more stature, then studying mythology isn't going to help you a bit. But if your idea of success is being a happier, better person, then a study of mythology is essential. And I said, wow, that's the divide right there. That's the divide. Having more stuff, having more power, having more prestige on one side, and being kinder or being happier and being a better person on the other side. These are the two divides. That's, Now, Bullfinch died in 1867. So I'm assuming he wrote those words before that, If not, we've got a whole nother topic to go to. But he wrote this before 1867, at least. And he kind of summed it up where we are today. What is the purpose of life, you see? Is it to have more stuff? Is it he who dies with the most toys wins? Or is it to be a happier, better person, by whatever that means to us? And I've had some conversations with folks, and I've kind of asked them, along the lines of, people will say, well, our country, whatever country they're from, our country is the greatest country in the world. And I will say, well, how do you know that? How do you measure that? What objective measurement do you have to go by? And if I'm, in our country, if I'm talking to people in our country, if we look at things like infant mortality rates and incarceration rates and things like that, it doesn't seem that, if you look at those things, that you would say, well, yeah, we're the best in the world. And the answer I frequently get back is, we are the best because we provide people with the opportunity to make the most money. And there you have it. What is your measure of success? Is your measure of success to have more money? Or is your measure of success to be happier, to be a better person? So there it is, So here I was kind of on this journey of discovery, and I said, well, wait a second, here we are, because in New Testament theology, we have this famous line that says you can't serve both God and money. You can't serve both God and money. And we have this divide. You see, we have this divide that kind of warns us, if we get too fixated on stuff, we lose our humanity. We lose our spirituality. Getting more, doing more, and having more power and more prestige and those sorts of things becomes kind of the driving force. And we forget the other side. The flip side of that is that at times people will say, well, money is evil and we shouldn't have money. And they will focus entirely on only doing the spiritual practice and overlook the practical applications of life. And we seem to be stuck in that argument between the two sides without realizing that there's a third, you see. There's a third in which it all comes together, So we are filled, our mythology and our history and our scriptures are kind of filled with cautions of not getting overly fixated on materialism. And if you read the email that I sent out last night, I was talking about the Legend of Atlantis, We have this Legend of Atlantis, which seems to be a great cautionary tale. It was about a society of people who became overly intelligent, if you will, in their use of technology. But they didn't have the maturity to handle it. And they destroyed themselves, you see. Now, did Atlantis ever really exist? I don't know. I don't know if it did or it didn't. But it's one of these stories, you see. It's one of these primordial stories, perhaps, these primordial ideas that bubbles up in different cultures at different times that lets us know that being overly fixated on stuff, on materialism, leads to our own self-destruction, leads to us losing the most important thing. As St. Paul said, what good does it do us to gain the whole world if we lose our soul? See, what good does it do if we gain the whole world but we lose our soul? I think I mentioned this before, but back in 1969 there was a sailboat race, a single-handed sailboat race around the world. The idea was that one sailor on the boat, and they would leave England and they would circumnavigate the world without stopping anywhere. And the one who did it in the shortest time would win. And there was a gentleman named Bernard Moitessier, who is a legend in sailing circles. And Moitessier was in the race, and unbeknownst to him at the time, had he stayed in the race, he would have won it. But he went all the way from England, went down around the tip of Africa, went all the way through the Indian Ocean, came back around the tip of South America, and he had some type of a spiritual awakening, some type of an epiphany. Sailing for money was not good in his mind. Sailing should be done for the sake of sailing, for the purity of sailing, for the communing with the sea and nature, and just for the very sake of sailing. So he turned his boat. He was maybe halfway up the coast of South America, heading back towards England, and he turned his boat and he went back towards Africa to go around Africa again. He was headed to the South Pacific. He was going to Tahiti, and that's where he was going to stay. And along the way, a steamship spotted him, and they pulled up alongside of him, and they shouted down through the megaphone, "Are you Moitessier?" And he signaled that he was. The people running the race had sent out an alert. This guy's missing. If you see him, let us know. So they threw down a note, tied a note to a bolt or something and threw it down onto the deck of his sailboat. And the note just had a bearing, and it said, "Sail this course." And Moitessier wrote something back on the note, and he put it in a slingshot, and he shot it back up to the deck of the steamship, the freighter. And what it said on the note was, "If I should sail that course, I shall lose my soul." Very much like St. Paul. Something shifted with him, that competing for money was not what he wanted to be doing. He wanted to discover his soul. So he turned his boat and he sailed, and the reason he's in the record books was he sailed 40,000 miles without getting off the boat, without ever touching land. World record that stands for today. So we have this dichotomy, we have this kind of a divide that not only do we see reflected within our country, but we see reflected within our own selves. And we're seeing it in our school systems as well. The humanities are being taught less and less and less. And we're focusing on science and technology. Not that that's a bad thing, but if we do it to the exclusion of that which makes us human, excuse me while I get a drink of water, it could become a bad thing. It could become a bad thing. A few years ago up in North Carolina, we're right on the border of North and South Carolina, so we get the North Carolina TV stations. But a few years ago in the governor's race for North Carolina, the then governor of the state was defending an action by the state legislature where they were trying to get, and I think they successfully did get, the university system of North Carolina to stop issuing degrees in women's studies. And in his defense of this decision, he said, well, people who get degrees in women's studies, they don't get very good paying jobs, and taxpayers should not be subsidizing people who just want to study things for studying's sake. We need to be putting people through school so that they get good jobs and become taxpayers. And I thought to myself, that, is getting a good job, is that the only reason that we should go to school? And of course there was another motive, there was another reason for it, a more subtle reason, which to me was very likely that the people who go and get the degrees in the humanities, they don't vote for this governor's party. And so it's kind of a manipulation going on there, I felt. But if you look across what we're valuing, you even see many ads now pop up in the Facebook feed that says you don't need a college education, get this job, it pays well. And that's true, there are very good trade jobs and technical jobs. But I think we need to be aware of the fact that what we are doing is we are losing our contact with this ancient wisdom. We are losing this contact with those who have gone before us and who have built that bridge across the gorge, who have kind of told us the way to go, have showed us on the map, here there be dragons, don't go here, it's trouble. And we can learn from that if we will avail ourselves to that. We can find that ancient wisdom bubbling up as people are kind of telling us their experience, giving us their ancient wisdom. And if you remember some years ago when the great tsunami hit in the South Pacific and did all the destruction there were a group of native peoples who were safe because even though they had not seen a tsunami for hundreds and hundreds of years, they still taught their children through the stories that they told. They still taught their children, if you ever see the ocean rushing away from the shore, run to the high ground because it's going to come back. It's going to come back. See, ancient wisdom gets passed down. So what struck me, where I got with this journey of discovery this week, is that much of what we are dealing with today, what we are seeing today, is not new. And we have been cautioned in the past about what happens when a society becomes overly consumed with its technology and its intellect and focuses its attention on more stuff, you see. More power, ego, all those sorts of things. And now what we want to do is we want to come back to, well, what is it that's important to us, you see? Is it just having stuff? Or is it just being a better human being? Or can we be better human beings and have stuff all at the same time? All at the same time. So one caution I will issue is that if we go back and we look at Scripture, what it tells us about wealth and what it tells us about money, it is that it is the attachment. It is the attachment to these things that is the problem. Not the things in themselves. They are inert in themselves. But if we are overly attached to them, that becomes a problem. Anything that we are overly attached to becomes a problem. Becomes a problem for us. What we are told in the New Testament is, seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. Remember, I don't know if you, probably Matthew 5, 6, and 7, Sermon on the Mount is the essence of what Jesus taught. Don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about how you're going to pay the rent. Don't worry about these things. The Father in heaven knows that you need them. Seek ye first the kingdom. And what what this means to me is that when we recognize who and what we are already spiritual beings. We are already spiritual beings having a human experience. And when we make that our priority, then the ways and the means to have the resources that are appropriate for our lives shows up. It shows up for us. We figure it out, It's not like necessarily it's just going to rain $100 bills out of heaven. That's not what I'm saying at all. But the ideas that we need to be of service in a meaningful way, to receive the ideas, the money, the material, and the goods that we need in order to live this life in this world, they arrive. They show up without a sense of struggle or a worry or thinking, I've got to make more, I've got to have more, those kind of things. So how do we seek this kingdom? How do we seek this kingdom? And the answer is always the same. It is always the same. Jesus said to go into your prayer closet and to pray in secret. And what the Eastern teachings tell us is be still and know. Be still and know. So we have, Matthew said on Wednesday night, he had a teacher who told him, you have to get past your blah, blah, blah neurons firing in your brain. Right? You have to get past the monkey mind. You have to get past that which is constantly churning and trying to figure out things and maybe trying to figure out how to make more money and how to get more stuff and how to be more powerful and all that. But no matter what, we have to recognize that which we are seeking is already within. It is that gemstone at the bottom of the pond. And the chatter of our mind, see, that is a disturbance. That is us splashing our hand around in the water and raking up the mud. And what we must do is simply do what people have been telling us for thousands and thousands of years. We must be still, and we must know. But most importantly, we must be consistent with it. We can't just do it a few minutes here and a few minutes there and expect results. I like there's a TV commercial now and it says, what if just doing one push-up would protect you? And they've got a guy goes in the gym and puts the mat down and does one push-up and leaves, and he's kind of strutting out like he really did something. I think sometimes we're like that with our spiritual practice. We just sit for a minute here or a minute there. But we must be consistent. We must be consistent. So what is our intention? It comes down to our intention. What is our intention? Is our intention to focus on getting more stuff and being more powerful? Is our intention not not to have stuff and be more powerful, but to be better, happier people? Is our intention to be first, to seek first the kingdom, which is the presence of the divine within, to seek first the kingdom and trust that all else will be added to us? How much time do we spend each day on the material things of life? How much time do we spend each day just making a living, doing the things associated with making a living? Getting better at our jobs, for example. Thinking about our jobs, talking about our jobs. And compare that to how much time do we spend becoming better people, becoming happier people. And I think all of us would say, I spend too much time doing the one and not enough time doing the other. Teachers have gone before us. They have laid out the ways before us. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali have 111 different ways to meditate. There's got to be one in there that'll suit you. Osho kind of retranslated them and gave his interpretation in his Book of Secrets and his Book of Wisdom. I think he wrote 2 books on it. We have to find what works, and we have to practice, and we have to practice, and we have to practice. Gratitude is a practice. Compassion or loving kindness is a practice. It's an attitude we can do all of the time. Meditation is a practice. We have to make up our minds. We have to set our intention. We have to make our decision. The ancient wisdom tells us that there is something already within here and that we can discover it. You know the King Arthur's legends, the search for the Holy Grail. In our society, we've translated that to be the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper. But it means the presence of the divine within. That's the Holy Grail. That's what we're searching for. We are searching for our authentic selves. It is here. It is now. It's never going to be any more here or now than it is. But we have to realize that. We have to realize that. We have to want that. We have to get beyond the distractions of the mind. We have to be still. We have to know. And as that presence becomes more and more of a companion, if you want to think of it this way, as something that we are in contact with, something that we experience, then the details of life become easier. We don't have to struggle. We don't have to give all our attention to getting more stuff, because all that stuff's going to go away someday anyway. It will. Our bodies will go away someday anyway. But our consciousness, our soul, the part of us that we hopefully are trying to discover more of every day, see, that goes on forever. Again, I'll go back to New Testament. Don't put your treasure in that which is going to rust and rot and will be eaten by the moths, but put your treasure in heaven. Heaven is your conscious realization of the presence of the divine. See, it's that deja vu stuff all over again. We've been told the simple truths many times in our lives. And if we go back to different cultures over different times, they have told us the same simple truth. The presence is here. The presence is within. Quiet your mind. Be still and know. Make it a priority. Develop your time for practice. Choose your technique for practice. And practice. And practice. And practice. And so it is.